So it's quite fascinating because we start off talking about, Vajpayee with his teenage essays about, the Muslims kind of taking over and us having to, teach them lesson or not trust them or throw them out or whatever. Then staying through with a party, with an organization like RSS, who was really committed to the Hindutva cause, to then, while the final culmination happens, he's kind of wanting to distance himself from, because Babri was really the culmination of a lot of what, was happening, brewing for so long, which he was part of. But he kind of distances himself. And you say that some of the reasons could be his foreign travels, him just opening up to the world and realizing that there's a different kind of politics that he may want to pursue while being Hindutva. But there's also now, and you write about his personal life. There's also the, I wouldn't call it conspiracy or whatever, but there is also chatter about the fact that there was a liberalizing force, so to speak, in Vajpayee's life, and that was Mrs. Kaul, his partner, the mother of his love child. They stayed together, and this is fairly known among, I guess, journalists who've been covering the BJP or Lutyens Delhi, so to speak, but it hasn't been written as much. And you write an entire chapter on his personal life with Mrs. Kaul. They stay together. In fact, Mrs. Kaul's husband also. The three of them kind of come to this arrangement where he continues his affair with her and they have a child, but she also remains married. And there is this chatter that she was actually a liberal, coming from a different class, English educated, very opposite to what Vajpayee was. And she had this influence over his life that mellowed him and,
Manisha,
what is it, taming of the brute or whatever.
much of this chatter comes from people who got to know the family only in the 80s during the Ayodhya movement. And by then, I think Vajpayee had himself become a moderate. But when you talk about her influence, one has to go back to the 50s. And I do not think, look, Vajpayee was, as a right, I call him an emotionally desolate. He was a man-child in the 50s. There was a lot of trauma, pent-up trauma, and all of that. And she provided him an emotional anchor. And that is, as a biographer, I think that's a massive contribution. Because I do think private life is a huge part of an individual's life. And so she did bring that bit of emotional stability to his life, and which that is a significant contribution. But I do not think
she liberalized him.
Yes,
that is the right word.
I don't think because I'll tell you what. Even though she came from a slightly higher class than Mr. Vajpayee did, they came from the same milieu. They were both brought up in Gwalior. They also, they might not have been lovers at college. They went to the same college. And she got married to a man who was from Balrampur. Now, Balrampur, from where Vajpayee won election, was also a Hindutva bastion. So, this, the evidence that, they kind of moderated him is rather very spurious. I don't think there exists a solid evidence of that. And in any case, they also voted for Jansangh later. So, yes, as I said, they provided him a family life, and that is a mammoth contribution on its own. But no, much of this chatter comes from journalists who got to know the family in the 80s, and they juxtapose that narrative on 50s.
And I just want to touch on this briefly because why did you as a biographer decide to write about this aspect of his life? Because not many people have before. Of course, journalists knew that he had a live-in partner, but no one really wrote that, he had a daughter from this live-in partner. Then this complicated situation of the husband and the wife and the lover living together, which would be very unheard of, I think, in that time in India.
I just thought that, all three of them are dead. I just thought, for how long can we keep lying to ourselves, Manisha? So this was, this was
a part of.
And not writing that would be dishonesty. And, frankly, for a biographer, it will be a criminal omission, I think. No self-respecting biographer would not want to write about it. But, there was an element of advocacy because I'm writing about the emotional and psychological lives of the Hindu right. I did want to introduce an element of broad-mindedness. I wanted people to know that it's okay for, politicians to have complex private lives.
And how did he deal with this complex private life, Atal? With his, of course, it was embarrassing for the party. He was a rising star. Something like this for a conservative party would have been embarrassing. But how did he, from whatever you know, and because he didn't write much about this aspect of his life, except you quote a few poems,
right,
which, talk a little bit about his inner turmoil. But how was he dealing with this, his private life versus his political life?
he was very smart and shrewd about it. I mean, after that, he had a really stable emotional life. Even though he kept lying about it in public, he always said that, that I'm a bachelor, or I'm a fakir, or I don't have a family.
Didn't he say that as a jibe to Sonia Gandhi also once about his bachelor?
May have been, but no. But Manisha, I'm talking of the early decades. I'm talking in the 60s and 70s. That's what I'm saying. Examples of Vajpayee's double speak. That he would kind of make it sound as if he was that fakir. Who had given away his career and who had chosen not to get married
for the sake of the nation.
To save India's soul, all of that. And he had actually a huge fan following by the 70s, and people thought of him like that. You see how he's such an eligible bachelor, but he chose not to get married. So he also kind of he liked to project an image like that. Yeah.